And let me share my screen. I think we're done with Canva, time being. Sure, we'll see it again. These two files, I'll show you where they're at. Go ahead and download these. They're on your exercises folder. Now, if you are hip to the Adobe help desk, if you Google Photoshop tutorials, the very first one is Adobe. That's where these tutorials come. That's where one of these tutorials came from. And a lot of these will come from because it's just easier for me to grab their files. And I can also link to the demo. So if you need someone else to explain it, there's someone that works for Adobe that will walk you through it in their words. So under assignments and projects, every day you might want to take a look at exercises and go ahead and download these things. We're going to do selections first. Here's the file that we're going to work with, the PSD, and then here's a link to prove it to Adobe Learn. And the way that this would work is if you want to do it in real time, you will begin tutorial in Photoshop. Now, I'm not going to do this. Well, maybe I actually will. Yeah, I think actually I will. Because I want to show you how wishy-washy some of these tutorials can be. Or you can just watch the video. The video, I think, is a lot better. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this photograph and we're going to change some colors using selections and adjustment layers. So here's our host. Actually, he might just be showing some stuff in Photoshop. This might actually be, oh yeah, here it is, boom. So we're using looks like a brightness contrast and then some hue saturation. And that's what we're going to use. We're going to change the color of the wall over here to red, and we're going to change the curtains to red. Simple. Now, if you choose to, you could absolutely begin tutorial in Photoshop. What's nice about this, I suppose, is it opens the file for you. So if I do this, start tutorial, and then here we go. Okay, I like the idea of this, but trust me when I say it's got its problems because you have to do the orders precisely as they're laid out. If you choose to grab a different tool for some reason, or if you know a different way of doing something, it throws off the tutorial and you can't go to the next step. So it really causes more problems than it solves. So I will do this line by line with you guys, and then I'll just redo it real quick and show you kind of like what the idea here is. So for those of you that are still kind of on the fence, like what is Photoshop? It is a layer-based program. That's what separates a beginner Photoshop user from an intermediate Photoshop user. It's layers, how you use layers. Next to that would be selections. So if you're good at selections and you're good at layer management, we would consider you probably intermediate. After that, it would be masking and smart objects. You get a real good handle on that and you're good at both of those, then we can kind of move into the advanced category. That's where I want to be by the end of this course. In order to do something, we're really going to have to make sure what our layers look like. So I'm going to kind of move this around here. We've got two layers. We've got a layer called clouds. Just going to turn the visibility, or I'll move this discover down so we can see what this looks like. How did I get to the discover thing? I went in our classroom under exercise 1 selections. I clicked on this link. It brought me here. And then there's this blue button that says begin tutorial in Photoshop. From there, this discover balloon should be up. If it's not, you can close it out and then open it. It should be there. If you don't see it, don't worry. I'll show you exactly what to do. And I'll probably do it not better, but in a way that if you make a mistake, it's not going to throw things off. All right, so I want to take a quick look around here. I've got a layer named truck. Thanks for naming that. That's cool. I got a layer named clouds. Thanks again for naming that. Turn off the clouds. Voila, clouds. Turn off the truck. It's everything else. The truck layer should be selected, which it is. I know that because it's lit up. Your interface might look a little bit different than mine. That's okay. The more that you get comfortable with Adobe products, you'll probably start wanting to customize your own workspace. And you can do that. Window, workspace, and then you could just new workspace, and it would ask you to name it. So maybe you're doing a lot of painting and you've got a really cool painting workspace. Save it. You can dial it up later. Or you could say, you know what? I want to see what Photoshop, the engineers deemed as motion. You could do that. If you ever need to reset it though, just reset essentials. It will, what we call baseline. It'll blow everything out. And it'll bring you back to this. I don't need to do that. I just wanted you guys to be aware. So the truck is lit up. The truck layer should be selected, and you're looking for these blue prompts is really what you're doing with these type of tutorials. It should be selected, which it is. If it's not, click it to select it. The truck layer contains everything except the clouds, which is located blah, blah, blah. Click next to continue. So far, so good. When you don't see the next icon lit up, that means you've missed a step. So I can go to next. And here's where things get a little bit buggy because I got to move the chat over. Create a new adjustment layer icon and choose brightness contrast. This creates an adjustment layer, Adjustment layers, what are they? They're layers that will affect something. Could be brightness contrast, could be hue saturation, could be vibrance, could be a lot of things. But they're very forgiving, they're very flexible, and that's why we use them. In this case, we are going to use it to change the overall brightness of the composition. So where are they? It's right here. It's a little circle. Half of it's black, half of it's white. Those are your adjustment layers. Now, you won't remember that maybe by Wednesday, maybe not by next week. Hopefully, though, by the end of this class, you'll know new layers, adjustment layers, and masks. Those three are real important. But here it is right here. And when you click on it, you got a few to choose from. Solid color, gradient, pattern, brightness contrast, which is what we want, levels, curves, exposure, and so forth and so on. We will probably go through about half of these throughout the semester. There's some that we won't touch. It's not that they're not good. It's just, that's like a designer told me a long time ago. Just because you've got every crayon in the crayon box doesn't mean you got to use them all. So all we really need right now is brightness contrast. So it adds a layer above whatever layer was selected. It also, in the properties, gives me the properties of that particular adjustment layer. In this case, it's brightness contrast. So I've got a brightness slider and a contrast slider. Now, whenever it comes to sliders, folks, what I usually tell people is just jam them all the way to one side, see what it does. So in this case, if I want to see what brightness does, well, I'm going to click, hold, and drag. Oh yeah, that got bright. Oh, it got dark. What does contrast do? It got contrasty. It got less contrasty. All right, pretty self-explanatory then. Makes sense. All right, what is this asking me to do next? Click the new adjustment layer, which I did. Yep, so we got that. So we should be able to go to next. And we can. I just explained the controls. They're up here with sliders. I would encourage you, especially with like layer styles, you know, like your drop shadows, your outer glows, any effects like that, any filters, take those sliders and just ramp them both sides. You're not going to break anything, but it gives you a good idea of like, oh, that's what relief does, or that's what noise does. If I was to say, you know, what does, I don't know, gamma gain do? I don't know. Just pull the slider. You'll find out. All right. So we want to what? Drag the brightness slider to 50. All right. Sounds good. So we brightened it up 50. And that's it. So we can go to next. Notice that everything in the truck is brighter. Yeah, because we brightened it. Makes sense. I want to say this. This is important. Adjustment layers affect everything below it. So if I had several different images, underneath the truck, they would all be affected as well. Right now, the clouds are not affected because the clouds sit above that adjustment, but we're going to change that pretty soon too. We'll click next. Now drag the brightness contrast adjustment layer above the clouds, and let's take a look and see if the clouds do indeed get brighter. Spoiler alert, they will. And just like that, the clouds kind of popped out. Cool, great. So we've created an adjustment layer. We made everything brighter, everything underneath it. And if we had more layers, you better believe that those would adopt that adjustment layer, assuming they're below. All right, so I think we can go to next. Yep, everything got brighter, cool. Next. Oh, here's a bonus. You can edit or even delete the adjustment layer at any time. Yeah, so if I say, you know what, I want it brighter, click on it. Here's your slider still. You get brighter, or don't. Or you can just trash it by just pulling it to the trash icon. I'm going to leave it in place. So when I said that things are forgiving, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Back in the day, before adjustment layers, you would apply the brightness contrast to the layer itself. And the problem with that is once you do that, you have irreversibly affected the pixels. So you've thrown out data and it's not coming back. Now, it might have made it brighter, which is great. But then if the client's like, you know what, it's a little bit too bright, let's back that off some. Then you're chucking even more data out by going the other way with it. You don't have to do that anymore. The adjustment layer is non-destructive, and that's really important. All right, it says select the truck layer. I'll select the truck layer. Boom. Now that blue prompt has shifted over to the left-hand side. Now we're going to get into some selection tools. Now, I want to talk a lot about selection tools in the weeks to come, especially with this collage. It's going to be important. So the more that you know, the more tools that you have in that tool belt, the better your selections are going to be. I don't need this character. I'll close that out. And I don't need my tool presets either. So it's asking for the quick selection tool. If it's already selected, click another tool and then click this tool. If you don't see it, right click on it and go to click select. So here's where your selection tools are nestled. First one is the marquee. And anytime that you see a little white arrow in the lower right-hand corner of the tool, that means there's more stuff underneath it. I know somebody's thinking, why didn't they just show all the tools? Because if they did, your entire workspace would just be tools. So they did it to maximize real estate. But underneath your marquee, you've got an elliptical, circle, single row, single column. A lot of people have no idea how to use these. I've only found one instance, but it's pretty cool, and I'll show it to you later. Underneath the lasso, selection brush, lasso, polygon, magnetic. We'll go through a lot of these too. Underneath that, object select, love that tool. Quick select, that's what we need. And then the magic wand, which a lot of people are fond of, but there's actually a lot better tools than that now. This is the one that we want. It's a quick select. It kind of looks like a brush that's painting dots. That's the one. So what's this tool do? It's going to allow you to click, hold, and drag. And as you click, hold, and drag, it's looking for like pixels within a range based off of the tolerance. It's looking for color. It's looking for value. It does a good job if things are like one color and sharp edges, like this wall is. And if I click, hold, and drag, at some point, it's going to see that whole wall. Oops, I clicked off of it. Let's try that again. These dots are a selection. They're what designers call the marching ants because they kind of look like little teeny ants running around. You've got a selection, and that's what you need to have. We're going to add another adjustment layer. And the cool thing about this is if you have a selection in place, your adjustment layer comes with a mask. All of them do, no matter which one you choose. Our brightness contrast has a mask. Nothing's being masked on it, but we could. But now that we have a selection in place, when we go to next, where's my, here we go. When I go to next here, it's going to say make a new adjustment layer. This one's going to be hue saturation. It's going to take that selection and say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and mask that part for you because chances are you want that. You made that selection, and we do. So here's our hues, or here's our adjustment layer. Again, circle, half black, half white. I think of like an eclipse. Like it looks like the moon that's kind of like half eclipse. Hue saturation. Now take a look at the difference between the mask. And if you don't know what a mask is, it's the little box to the right of the pixels. So here's the adjustment layer, that little icon that kind of looks like a grid with a gradient underneath it. The brightness contrast kind of looks like a sun, half black, half white, with little rays coming off of it. What's next to it is a rectangle, and this rectangle has a lot of black. That's the mask. Now I'm going to explain masks in great detail in the weeks to come. So if you're still kind of like, yeah, I've heard of it, I don't really know what's going on, don't worry. I've got a great analogy for it. I think as soon as I say it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. All right, but we do have a mask on it. Now we need to go to next. We're going to drag the hue slider to what? To the left about -153. Let's do that. And you can see that indeed that wall is changing color. Why? It's because the hue saturation slider, the hue, the color, I'm spinning that slider to different colors. Why isn't everything doing that? I don't want you to do this. Just leave it as is. Just look at my screen for a second. If I didn't have that mask, take a look at what happens. Come on, you. I don't even know if I can move this. Ah, there we go. Good. If I didn't have that mask, in fact, I'll just quickly disable the mask. Now take a look at it. As I spin the hue, everything gets weird, which is cool, pretty psychedelic. That's the look I'm going for, great. But I don't want everything to get all wonky. I don't want a green sky. I don't want a purple sky. I really just want that wall to change color. That's why we created that selection. The mask is isolating just that part of the image. So let me enable that mask again. Go back to my slider by clicking on the little left icon. Where a lot of people will run into problems is they're not on either the adjustment layer or they're not on the mask. I wish there was a better indicator. I wish it was lit up better, but I didn't design this. The only visual indication that you have that you're on the adjustment layer or the mask is that teeny 2-pixel white bounding box around it. So if you're not seeing your hue slider, click to the left of it. Now you're on the adjustment layer, and I can go to negative, what, 153, something like that. Good enough. Blue wall. Okay. So it's telling me that the mask adjustment layer is white in the selected area and black in the unselected. The black hides the adjustment, which appears. I'm going to explain more of this in detail. So just right now, just roll with it. Go to next. All right. Now we are going to manually paint on the adjustment layer the window, the curtains. So this was not part of our original selection, but that's okay because we can always add and subtract from the mask at any time. So I'm going to select the brush tool. Now, buyer beware. There are several things in your tool palette that look like brushes. There is a quick select tool that's kind of got a brush icon in there. There is a selection brush. It's got the word brush in it. There is an eyedropper that kind of looks like a brush. There's a brush. There is a color replacement, color mixer, art history brush. What is this? What's this thing called? Because there's nothing underneath it. Color replace tool, I think is what that one is. But we just want the brush. And a good hotkey, because brushes come up a lot. A hotkey to remember is B on the keyboard. B for brush. So click on your brush. Wants me to change the size a little bit. You don't have to do this step, but might as well. It's saying to set the size to about 60 pixels and the hardness to 100. Size, how big it is. Hardness would be how much feathering is around the edge. Now you can absolutely drop this down and choose size of 60, hardness of 100. That's what they're asking for, but let me give you a little bit of advice. When it comes to brushes, I need to, right now, I've got the brush. I got everything set, but I've got the little Ghostbuster symbol, the little slash. It's saying you can't do that. It's because I'm painting on the adjustment. It won't let you do that. You need to be on the mask. So click on the mask, make sure you're on the mask, and then your brush is revealed. All right, my tip. Because if I was to say, all right, guys, what does a brush of 150 pixels look like? You'd have no idea. What does 3,000 pixels look like? I have no idea. But I can look at that brush and say, that's too big. A hotkey to on the fly change your brush size. And this is the same for Illustrator too, so it's a good hotkey. Those are your bracket keys. So I'm looking at my keyboard and backspace, caddy corner to that in the lower left, I have two bracket keys. Left bracket will make my brush smaller. Right bracket will make my brush bigger. As you're painting, and you guys will be doing at least one digital painting, probably a lot more, this is going to save a lot of time. So I'll just dial this in to about 60. Looks good. Hardness, if you hold down Shift and the bracket keys, that will adjust your hardness. All right. Well, I can go to next. Make sure the foreground color is white. Now, it already is white, but it's asking me to toggle. And this is one of those things I was saying. It won't let you go to the next step until you literally do that. So flip them around. That little toggle button will flip foreground and background. You can also click this icon, which is the two little squares. I don't ever use this. In fact, this is the first time I even knew that this kind of existed. So you can flip that. I think it's just a toggle as well. Some more hotkeys. I'll repeat this. D for default will change your brushes back to black and white. So if I had red, and actually, let me kind of my clouds layer. If I said, all right, I got red here and green in the background, some Christmas colors. That's great. That's not going to work on my mask because my mask only understands grayscale. So if I hit D for default, back to black and white. X, as in xylophone, will toggle foreground and background colors. All those are pretty useful tools. I don't expect you to remember those. I'll keep bringing them up throughout the semester. All right, we got white selected. Looks good. I'm going to make sure I'm on the mask. That's important. Very important. Got the mask. Now I can simply click, hold, and drag and paint in. It looks like I don't have white selected, so I'll hit D. So now I got white selected. Click, hold, and drag. And I am revealing that adjustment layer. Make sure I got 100% opacity. That doesn't look, I got 50% opacity. Bring that up to 100. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Control plus to zoom in. Space bar to bring up the little hamburger helper icon, the move tool. Anytime you hold down space bar in any Adobe program, it'll allow you to scrub the artboard. Paint this on. Oh, I got a little bit too far. I hit some of that truck, so I'll hit X for another color, my black, cover up some of that stuff. This does not need to be surgical, folks. The idea is what's important here. So just get those curtains blue, get the side of the building blue, and as soon as you're done with that, you are done with this tutorial. Let's review. We created two adjustment layers. One affected the brightness contrast. One affected hue saturation. The hue saturation, we went a step further though, because we made a mask. We had a selection that allowed us to isolate part of the adjustment layer, so we only see what we want to see from that adjustment layer. Now I could even go as far as say, all right, it looks good, but the client really wanted more purple. All right, go back to your adjustment layer, find purple. Is that the color they're looking for? No, not quite that, more bright. That, no, more green. That, perfect, good, great, done. Totally flexible. Once you're done, save it as a PDF file, save as. You're going to want to save it to your computer though. You can't save it to the cloud because you can't submit from the cloud. So save it to your computer. I usually just put my stuff to the downloads. PDF is just fine. Save. Okay. And you can turn off all this other junk. That's just going to add layers. It's going to add file size to it. It doesn't need to have this. All I'm going to do, this is pass fail stuff. You either did it or you didn't do it. 10 points. Easy, easy. Most of you are probably already done. Save it, submit it now. You don't want to worry about it. Save PDF, then upload it to our class. Questions? We got one more to go through. Chat pod out and see if I missed anything. Name the file. Don't really care what you name it. Just it's going to go to your folder. So, yep, looks perfect. If yours looks like that in the chat pod, you're doing good. I don't even care if the colors are totally accurate. As long as I can see that you created a mask and altered those two areas, you're good. Name it whatever you want. I don't care. Your projects do have to have a certain naming convention, but we'll talk about that next week. Exercises, I could care less. No, it is possible, Jason. It's just not possible to submit from the cloud. So you are going to have to save it locally. So you can save all this stuff to the cloud, that's fine. But when you upload it to Blackboard, it can't see the cloud. That's the only reason I said that. All right, let's do one more. This one does not have a tutorial associated with it, so you're just going to follow my instructions. So let's get to it. And for those of you thinking, well, that wasn't an 11 by 17. That's true, it wasn't. The exercises are a bit different. They'll be whatever size the document is. Don't feel like you got to make the exercise 11 by 17. In fact, please don't. That will start hogging up the space in Blackboard. All right, what's next? We're done with this. You will see this database a lot. These are easy exercises, and they're just skill builders. You know, there's no creativity with these. Selections and adjustment layers. We're going to be using this image of oranges. So let's download it. I call this Taste the Rainbow because we're going to take this orange wedge, and for each little slice, that little pizza slice in there, we're going to change the colors. How we're going to do it? Almost identical to what we just did. We're going to use adjustment layers and a selection tool. And if we do it right, it should be pretty fast. You guys should be done in about 5 minutes. So let's give it a shot. File open. It's in my downloads. This image came from Unsplash, so it should be pretty high quality. I don't need this. All right. Now, which image you choose, I'm sorry, which orange you choose is up to you. You can do them both if you want to. I don't care. But I'm really just looking for one. I think the one on the top is going to be a little bit better because it's a little bit more defined. Could be wrong. We'll find out. I'm going to zoom in by hitting Control plus a few times. Hold down that space bar to bring up my move tool, and then just click, hold, and drag because I really want this in focus. All right. I need to select a wedge. Which one do I select? I'll start at the top, 12 o'clock, and I'm just going to rotate around. We're going to do a Roy G. Biv here. We're going to make the first slice red, orange, so forth, and so on. What's the best selection tool to use? I don't know. Well, we used the quick select tool last time. That seemed to work pretty well. Let's give it a shot. Still got the quick select tool, but my brush is teeny tiny. So hotkey for that, right bracket. I'm going to scale that up. How big? About that big. I don't know what size that is. I'm just visually saying that that looks about right. If I need to make it smaller, I'll make it smaller. Now, one thing that we need to be aware of is when you make a selection, you can alter that selection. You can add to it, you can subtract from it, and we're probably going to need to do that. But let me pause here for a second. Does everyone got this file open? Is anyone having problems seeing this file, accessing the file? Jay looks good. Nothing in the chat, so I'm assuming we're good there. All right. Doesn't matter. Let's see. Image size. How big is this thing? It's in pixels by default. I mean, it came off of Unsplash, so it's 72 DPI. On Wednesday, we're going to talk about resolution and file size and things like that. But for right now, just it is what it is. Just let it be that. Yeah, you don't have to change anything. The size that it came is just fine. Well, let's see how this thing works. Right now, I've got an add to selection, so I'm just going to click, hold, and drag. I'm going to pray to God that it sees the edges of the rind. I don't know exactly what those little veins are in between there. Let's see what happens. I'm going to click, hold, and drag. Pretty good. And it got a little bit too much. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller by left bracketing. All right. So it did a pretty good job. Not a great job. Because if I put the adjustment layer on right now, it's going to get a little bit to the left-hand side. Now, yours might look a little bit different than mine. It's okay. Let's talk about how to add and subtract from the selection, and then we'll talk about how to clean up a mask, and then we'll be done. I selected a bit too much, and very often you will too. To subtract from a selection, you can do a couple things. Here, right up here in the top, you can see that right now by default, we're adding. So if I keep holding, and dragging, I'm going to keep adding to it. I've added too much. Next to it is a minus. You can probably use your imagination and say, well, if I selected too much, now I can click, hold, and drag, and I can start to chop the unwanted areas off. So that works out pretty well. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a hotkey instead of having to go up to the top of that every time to add and subtract? And of course, there is. If you hold down Shift, you'll add. You can see that the cursor now has a plus. So holding Shift will add selections. And it doesn't matter what tool you've got. Marquee tool, lasso tool, any tool, Shift will add. Alt, I'll go to the add tool, Alt will subtract. So another two pretty usable hotkeys. All right, I want to add to it, so I'll just click, hold, and drag. Boop, boop, boop. These selections don't have to be perfect, folks. That's not the point of this exercise. They look good enough, we'll call it good enough. I think that's about as good as it's going to get. You do need a selection for this, otherwise it won't really work. So make sure that you've got a selection. And then we're going to go to hue saturation. Here's our adjustment layers. We used it literally 5 minutes ago. Hue saturation, it worked for the wall, worked for the curtains, should work for the orange. All right, I don't know which way I need to spin this to get this to red, so I'm just going to go to the left first. Oh, there we go. Minus 21 looks pretty decent. All right. Move on to the next slice. I got lucky. The next one's actually orange. I'll leave it orange. But I could make it brighter. So big thing here is make sure you go back to your background layer, not the layer that you just created. If you try to select this, it's going to get a little weird. Go to your layer, click, hold, and drag, grab that next wedge. I went a little too far, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key, just chop that piece off. Hue saturation. This time I don't really need to move the saturation or the hue as much as the saturation, so I'll just make it, ooh, that's maybe a bit too much. I think we can all agree that that's pretty orange. Go back to the background, quick select tool, click, hold, and drag. I got too much. Hold down the Alt key, chop off the stuff I don't need. Hue saturation. It must be to the right, and there's my yellow. Go back to the background, and now it's just rinse and repeat, folks. Hold down the Alt key, chop off the stuff I don't need. Hue saturation. That was yellow. Boy, G, green. Green. Now, we might actually run out of slices. We might not be able to get them all. So do the rainbow, save it as a PDF. File, save as, PDF, submit it to the exercises. You've shown me that you understand at least how to use the quick select tool. You've shown me that you know how to apply said selection to a mask in an adjustment layer. That, I think, is a great start. And that puts us at 8:48. So I'm going to take attendance. You guys hang tight. Let's see who's all here. And I think I'm going to stop recording. Any questions before I stop recording that might be beneficial to people watching the recording? Everyone follow the demos okay? Did I go too fast? I know I've got a habit of doing that. I'll try to slow it down.